So I was asked to be a judge at this year's Value Electronics King of TV's TV Shootout, and I have a confession to make. It all started about 2.5 years ago when I was looking for a new Blu-ray player to replace my PS5, which wasn't playing discs that well. And I called up Robert at Value Electronics and I explained that I'm looking for a new Blu-ray player for a high-end home theater system and one that also supports 3D. And when I told Robert a little bit about my background as a filmmaker, film producer, and also a post-production guy, as you can see from my DaVinci Resolve post-production suite behind me, and Robert was like, Richard, you are the perfect person to become a judge at this year's TV Shootout. And I'm like, I get to sit there and watch all different types of monitors and compare that to the $40,000 Sony BVM reference monitor? Where do I sign up? And much to my surprise, this year was very different than all the previous years. When I got to the shootout, and the moderator explained the lineup and how the judging would go this year.
It was a very interesting challenge this year to do all of these displays.
When it turned out that there was only 4 monitors in competition, I'm like, hey, this is going to be easy. In the past, there were as many as 8 monitors, and it was a lot harder to keep them in your head as you kind of wrote down the score of each particular monitor. But little did I realize that this year, it was actually much harder to judge the sets because they were all so good. In the past, it was pretty obvious. There was one clear monitor that was head and shoulders above the rest. And that turned out to be the Sony A95L. Not just 1 year in a row, but 2 years in a row, which is very, very atypical. And this year, with Panasonic being back in the running for monitors, I was very, very excited. I use Panasonic cameras, and as a matter of fact, I'm recording this video with the Baby Vericam, that's the Panasonic EVA1, and I was really interested to see how Panasonic's new monitors would fare, because in the past, the Panasonic monitors have been really, really good. And here's the thing. I think Sony has an unfair advantage in these shootouts, and I'll tell you why. We're judging each monitor not against each other, but against the Sony BVM reference monitor. And the thing is that the same signal processing that Sony is using in their reference BVM series also trickles down to their consumer series. So I've always found, even though the panel in the Samsung and the Sony are the same panel, that Sony's electronics much more clearly match the electronics built into their reference monitor. So I always felt they had an unfair advantage. But again, our instructions were which monitor comes closest to the $40,000 reference grading monitor that films and TV shows are actually made of. But this year, each of the 4 models was performing at such a high level, it really was much more difficult to judge. I mean, we were really getting in there and pixel peeping and looking at charts and things like that, and you really had to look to see subtle differentiations between all the monitors. And even then, it wasn't like in the past where one monitor was clearly far better than any of the other monitors. This was a really, really close competition. And even though we could see differences in the test patterns, the question is, does that really translate to a viewing experience in the real world with actual film and video material, not just these test patterns? And so I was really interested to see if the subtle differences we saw in the test patterns would translate to what we would actually see when watching film and video content. And also, there was another monitor setup with all 4 monitors in the 55-inch version where FOMO was doing their live stream. And looking at the 55-inch monitors all together with no reference monitor was also really interesting as well. And what I found was that the Panasonic seemed to have better bright levels, more HDR-like, but the black levels were not as good as the other monitors and the Sony itself. So if we look at the results, the Sony was the winner of the TV shootout overall, but by a fraction of a percentage. And as a matter of fact, the Panasonic was the winner in the HDR category. So this year's competition was very different than all the other years. And it was really kind of, what is your personal choice? Do you want maybe higher brightness levels, maybe a little bit more of an HDR pop, or are you like me, more of a black level freak where you really want the darkest black levels and great shadow detail? But overall, it was a great event. I really enjoyed myself. I got to meet some great people. I got to be interviewed on the FOMO, Fear of Missing Out, live stream. And so my confession is that this year's judging was so much harder than any of the previous years because all the monitors performed at an extremely high level. And just because a monitor won the King of TV shootouts, it doesn't mean that that is the best monitor for you. If you enjoy exploring high-end video and also high-end audio, please consider subscribing to my channel. I've got some other really interesting videos about a new type of electrostatic speaker. And what I've even have done, I've taken a very high-quality Schoeps microphone and recorded 2 different types of speakers, and we go back to back so you can hear the differences over your system. And I'm also going to be making videos and showing footage about the brand new Blackmagic Pixis 12K state-of-the-art cinema camera. So consider coming back for more.